Hey YouTube. So today we're coming at you with a video about what are all these bits and pieces that you're putting or potentially putting into your PC build or even just upgrading. I've got the build video out there and I do a little bit of explaining in there, but I had a friend at work recently suggest, hey, maybe you do a video explaining what all this stuff is. I'm coming from a console and I don't know what any of these parts even are. It's totally Greek to me, and I haven't found any good videos out there that explain it. So that's all we're going to do today. I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'm just going to kind of run through the list here that you see on the screen, and just a couple 3 minutes on each thing. Talk about it real fast, and then let me know in the comments if there's any particular section that you'd like me to go over in its own video in more detail. I'm thinking motherboard might be a good one, because that's the most complicated of all of the bits, as you'll kind of see here in a moment. So I've kind of listed out the what I think are the basic things here. So your case, your motherboard, your CPU, your GPU, your RAM, your PSU, your storage device, and then miscellaneous. We'll talk about what some of the miscellaneous things are. So without further ado, we're going to talk about cases first. And this should be pretty quick and painless, but the case is the box that all of the other components go in. Everything is going to mount inside of your case. From your motherboard, GPU, everything, your cooling fans, everything is going to be inside of here. And then what else your case offers, let's see if this has a good picture of it. So your motherboard is going to stick out the back here, and your power supply is going to stick out the back here. And so that's going to be where all of your I/O stuff is and where your power cord plugs into down here. And then, well, I wanted to show you, well, since we're here, this is the back side of the case, where all of your cable management happens. So this is the power supply. Down here on the bottom, power cables come out, get routed to their individual components. Was trying to find a picture. Yeah, there's nothing good here. Let's go to a different one real quick. Here we go. So the other thing that the case is going to offer you is your front panel I/O stuff. So how many USB ports does it offer? Does it have USB-C? Does it have a headphone jack? Does it have a reset button, power lights? All this kind of stuff is also going to be a part of your case. So moving on down the list, the next thing is going to be the motherboard. So we're going to go over here. So most of the motherboards you look at are going to be similar to this, unless you go something really fancy or much older. And even then, the layout is still the same, but it may just, a fancier motherboard is going to have more heat sinks and heat spreaders and things on it. May look a little bit different. I went with a little bit more basic one so I could show you different aspects of it. So the motherboard is like, well, it's the mother to your system. It's the thing that everything else connects to, comes out of. Like the mothership is where all the little baby, spaceships come out of. The motherboard is the main control thingy-majig of a PC. It doesn't do any of the computing, but it enables the communication between the CPU, which is the brain, and all of the other components of the PC. So on the edge here, you can see this is where all of your IO stuff is. USB, audio, HDMI, more USB, all of your connections for anything that's going to be external to the PC come out of here, or your front IO panel, with one exception that we'll talk about when we get to the GPU. Your CPU is going to slot in right here. Your RAM sticks are going to go in these slots over here. If you're using an NVMe drive, those types of SSDs mount in these types of locations here. And this thing that says M.2 Armor on it is a heatsink that'll go on top of that drive. And then you can see another space right down here. I don't know if you can see it on your screen or not, but it says Ultra M.2 right here, and this is another section right here for another NVMe drive. This is your one of your PCIe Express slots here. So this is where your graphics card is going to slot into. Underneath this heatsink here is the chipset of the motherboard. So the chipset kind of directs all of the traffic from the things that are not on PCIe lanes connected directly to the CPU. So if you're talking about, say, 12th gen Intel, those chips have 16 plus 4 lanes. What does that mean? Well, the topmost PCIe slot here is going to take up that first 16 lanes. So that is a direct highway. This PCIe slot there is a direct highway to the CPU. So the GPU and the CPU have direct communication. And then the other plus 4 is for your NVMe drive that's in the middle here. So one of these drives, so this is a Gen 4 drive right here, or can be a Gen 4 drive, because it's going to take up 4 lanes. So this drive will have direct access to the CPU. So your graphics card and your topmost M.2 NVMe drive are going to have direct PCIe lanes to the CPU. So this is the M.2 then that you would want to put your operating system on, for example, because it's going to give you the fastest boot times, fastest accessing your programs, etc. If your chipset and your CPU support more PCIe lanes, which most of them do, then your chipset down here, so like this other NVMe slot down here, this other M.2 slot, while it does not have a direct access highway to the CPU, it gets routed to the CPU through the chipset. The chipset is kind of like traffic light that helps direct some of the other peripherals and externals to the CPU. This picture isn't so hot, but yeah, here we go. These couple of little black connectors on the edge here are if you have a SATA style SSD versus the NVMe style. It's too much with the writing on here. Your 24-pin power connector, that goes on the side over here. These guys up here are for your CPU power. Well, we'll call it short there. Like I said before, there's a ton of information, tons of different features and things involved with a motherboard that we could go over here. But in the interest of time, motherboard is where all of the other bits to your PC connect to. And then this guy will bolt directly into your case. What's next on the list? CPU. So your CPU is going to mount right here on your motherboard, and your CPU is the brains of the outfit. It runs all the instructions and tells every other component of the system what to do. It crunches all the numbers and does all the math. It's literally the brain of your outfit. Now, there's not really a good... I looked at a bunch of different listings for CPUs for sale to try and find a good picture, and I didn't even have one on my phone or anything. This is as close as I could find here, is just an Intel chip, kind of sort of up close, but I don't even think that's a real picture. I think it's a drawing. So what I did is I'm going to show you a little bit of a clip from my how-to build where I insert the CPU here, and so you can see just what a CPU looks like. And while this is a 13th gen Intel AMD chips, you know, they all have a different, or they can have a different pin setup on the socket and on the bottom of the CPU, but they're going to look externally pretty similar to each other, whether it's Intel or AMD or even you know, how old or how new they are. They're all going to look pretty similar, unless you get like too far out of bounds. If you go back to like an original Pentium chip, I don't even remember what they look like. That might be different, but so I'm going to play the video here. So again, you can see this cover pops up and the CPU is going to go in here. So there's a good close-up of the CPU right there. See, it looks a lot like that drawing that was just on the screen there from that Newegg ad. While we're here, these guys here, these transistors are capacitors. I shouldn't have called them transistors. These are capacitors that function along with your VRM, which is your voltage regulation modules. So this controls the how the power gets distributed to your CPU, and some of them over here work with your memory as well. So there's a CPU going into the socket. Give you a good shot of that there. And next item on the list is the GPU. This one we're probably all familiar with. The GPU is, and this is just kind of randomly, a 1660 Super, which interestingly enough, they have brand new ones from EVGA for sale on Newegg right now. I thought that was interesting. The GPU is the device that, again, it plugs like everything else into the motherboard, but it is the thing that computes all of your graphics and all of your textures. Even if you're just watching a YouTube video, that information from the web goes through your GPU to go through calculations and get displayed on the screen. Going back to CPUs real quick, if you ever see, with Intel anyway, a CPU that's labeled with an F at the end, like the one that I just had in that video there, is a 13100F. It does not have an integrated GPU. And so what that means is you will get no picture displayed unless you have an external graphics card like this guy on the screen right here. If you want to display a picture from that integrated GPU on your CPU, then your output, your HDMI cord or your VGA or DisplayPort, what have you, will come off of the back, the I/O panel. It'll hook up to here. So here's an HDMI, here's a DisplayPort, right? So that's where your monitor will hook up to if you're using the integrated GPU. If you're using a discrete GPU like this, it has its own set of outputs that you would hook your monitor up to here. That's a real simple, easy mistake that a lot of new beginning PC builders deal with, is they may not know which one to hook up to. So if you have a discrete GPU, that's what you want to hook everything up to. If you do not, you can hook directly up to your motherboard, as long as you don't have one of those F SKUs. So next thing on the list is RAM. RAM stands for random access memory. And I'm not going to try and go through why it's called that because I don't even remember anymore. But your RAM it's where the work gets done external to the CPU. So you can think of your RAM like a workbench. If you have a smaller workbench, you can do less work at one time than if you have a bigger workbench. Then you can have multiple projects going on at the same time, right? Or you could think of it like building a puzzle. Like if you've got a 100-piece puzzle that you're working on, you don't need as big of a table to spread out all the pieces and kind of look at what you're working with there with the puzzle. You can do that on a smaller table, smaller workbench. Get up to like a 5,000 piece puzzle. Now you need a bigger work surface to spread those pieces out and to work on it. And well, that's kind of sort of how RAM works. Going from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes of RAM gives you a bigger and bigger each time workbench for your computer to do tasks on. If you're running an older system and you notice you've got like a bunch of Chrome tabs open or a bunch of Edge tabs open, and things start to run slow, that's just because your computer is running out of workbench space to have programs, to have applications running on. So RAM is important in a gaming application because the games themselves can use quite a bit of RAM, and your computer still got to run your operating system and any background processes that are going on. So RAM is pretty important. Your RAM, your CPU, your GPU, probably the three most critical components that you're going to put in the PC because it's going to determine how fast it is, how many things it can do at once, etc. This is a pretty bare bones looking kit of RAM here. This G.Skill, these Ripjaws. This is actually good RAM. This performs well, but it's just got some metal heat spreaders clamped over the top of the silicon here. There's no RGB. There's no nothing fancy on here, but these will stick into those slots on the motherboard right here. And it's hard to tell from these pictures, but this little notch right here, this section of the board and this section over here are two different lengths. So this notch will tell you it's only going to line up one way into these slots here. So that's how you can figure out how to put that in. Moving on down the list. PSU, so your power supply. Power supply, that's pretty obvious, right? That's where... I guess I didn't have a window open. I thought I did. We will show you power supplies. So here's a Corsair RM850X. This is actually very similar to the one I have in the ultimate budget gaming PC. I've got an RM750X in there. So this guy is just gonna take your wall power and convert it and send it out to where it needs to go in your system. Again, there could be a much longer video about power supplies and how to choose them. That's outside of the scope of what we want to do today. We're just kind of labeling each item and showing you what they look like. So this is a power supply. Your power cord from the wall is going to plug into here. It has an on-off switch on it, and then this is one of the newer guys that has the the connections on the side versus on the back. Your mileage may vary if that's going to be something that you would want to deal with or not. For certain case styles, this setup can be pretty sweet, but it might not be right for you. But this is just to illustrate and show you kind of what it looks like. So each of these things will be labeled and tell you what components it hooks to. And another thing to keep in mind is that so this is what's called a fully modular power supply. See how the box is just sitting here and there's no cables coming out of it? That's because the cables are modular. You can plug in or not plug in what you want to. So if you don't have a bunch of SATA powered devices in your PC, you don't have to have SATA power coming out. Most of your starting at mid-range, you're going to have semi-modular to fully modular, and then all of your higher end power supplies are going to be fully modular like this. If it's semi-modular, it'll have some of these left open, SATA power and some other stuff if you want to add some extra things, but your 24 pin main power and your however many PCIe cables that power supply supports, those will be already, they won't be detachable like what you see in this picture here. They're just going to be, there's going to be a, you know what, let's just show you. Let's go back to power supplies and not modular. So see, you've just got, it cuts the picture out, but you don't, instead of having all of those open ports that you can select what you want to plug into, it just has a big hole with a big mass of wires coming out, and you will use what they give you. And that's that. The other thing to keep in mind is that with the fully modular power supplies, or even the semi-modular, the connections are proprietary, meaning, so a Corsair cable cannot plug into a different type of power supply, like an EVGA, and an EVGA cannot plug into a Corsair, vice versa. Sometimes even an older cord from the same brand does not work in a newer unit. Sometimes units that were manufactured in the same year by the same brand, you can't swap the cords because they're actually not manufactured by the same company. So like Corsair, for example, has a couple of different companies that build their power supplies, and then Corsair slaps a Corsair name and logo on there. And so sometimes there's variances. So only use the cables that come with your power supply, or if you're buying from a place like Cable Mod, you for custom cables, you're going to specify what exact kind of power supply you have so you can get the right ones. That's really crucial to know. Moving on then to storage. So storage is where are you going to keep all of your stuff on your PC? So 15 years ago, your Spinny Boy hard drives were popular, / the only thing available. And nowadays, SSD drives have become so cheap and affordable and everywhere that hard drive usage has gone way down. Maybe if you're running like an NAS server for storage or something like that, those are going to have a bunch of spinning platter drives in it. But for a personal computer at home, for a gaming computer, I would recommend using a SATA drive like this, 2.5-inch solid state drive, or a NVMe drive like we were talking about earlier. And these are really cool. These things are like the size of a stick of gum and are just faster than all get out and slicker than snot. And you can get them, like this one's actually what this Western Digital Black 1 terabyte for $99.99 is not even a good deal. You can get them a lot cheaper than this, but this is going to be the easiest install, the fastest read write speeds. And again, we could do a whole video on NVMe drives, SATA drives, HDDs. We could do a really long video on storage devices and the pros and cons and everything of each of them. But just to keep in mind for the purposes of, you're putting a system together, storage is what you're going to store your pictures on, store your videos on, your applications on, all that sort of stuff. And I think last is miscellaneous. So miscellaneous is just, what didn't we talk about? So maybe you want to have some cable extensions so that your PC looks prettier. So you're going to buy some custom cable extensions and get the wires in cool colors and have cable combs on there. And those will plug into your power supply wires, and you'll put the cable extensions out in the visible part of the PC so that you can see them. Fans I'm including under miscellaneous. However many case fans your case came with, you'll have to factor in, do I need more? Do I need less? What do I have going on here? Fans are kind of in that miscellaneous thing. CPU cooler can go under miscellaneous. Every CPU needs a cooler, whether it's an air cooler or a water cooler, like an all-in-one. Water cooler is a budget-friendly way to get some water cooling on your PC, or if you go custom loop where you're really going hardcore with the cooling, all of that kind of stuff can fall under the moniker of CPU cooler. And for me, I put that under miscellaneous. I'm looking over at my PC right now to see if there's anything else that I would throw in there. There's different little bits and dongles and things that you might need, depending on how many fans you have. Well, maybe your motherboard doesn't have enough fan headers to hook up all the fans that you have, so maybe you'll need a fan splitter. Maybe you'll need an ARGB splitter to go off your motherboard. Those kinds of things. Just kind of anything that isn't a main PC part, I put under the miscellaneous category. So that's going to wrap it up. We've gone through each of these things, and I've tried to keep it as short as I can. I'm looking at my timer over here. I hit 27 minutes. It was not as short as I wanted it to be, but here we are. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you have a particular component that you want gone over in more detail, let me know in the comments, and I'll do, if I get enough traction, enough interest in one or more items, we'll do a video on the ones that have some interest. So thanks for watching. Give me a like, give me a follow, give me a subscription if you want to, if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time.